Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. This work session is all about interviewing candidates for the vacant seat vacated by Mr. Munson. We're going to start off. We're going to get right to it. And we're going to call our first candidate, who is Brian A. Foltz.
Like a Miss America pageant question right there. Gotta get rid of Trump. That's how.
Let me hear your best impression of Mayor Bush.
Right now?
No, no.
All right, welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
A little bit about yourself to start off with. Let's do that.
Hagerstown resident, born and raised here, moved away to go to college, University of Maryland at College Park, bachelor's work there. Shortly after graduation, moved abroad with my career. Was out of the area in Austria for about a year and a half, and then traveled with my career in the Midwest, returning to Hagerstown in 2007. Been in the area, living in the city of Hagerstown since 2007. Got my master's in engineering downtown at USMH. I'm currently employed by Volvo Group Trucks in Hagerstown, Maryland, as a senior data analyst. By trade, I'm an engineer, but have been involved in a lot of different commercial aspects of engineering. Have a passion for music. I've been an educator in the evenings in Washington County, Frederick County, and Carroll County, and in Montgomery County in the early 2000s as a music instructor or helper for instrumental music programs. Been a mentor to children in the high school range, giving private lessons. So I get a broad range of technical and business interactions in the community, and also in terms of music. Kind of a snapshot of me. Yeah.
I'm going to open it up to council questions if they have any. Who would like to start?
Well, what are two major issues facing the city, and how do you plan to address them?
I live on the east end of town, and so I see pretty much every day signs of heroin or drug trafficking and crime. There's been an increase on the east side of town. I live off Dole Highway. I can see it. I can hear it. I think that is something that needs addressed. I call them the 3 H's: homicide, heroin, and human trafficking. I think that it does a lot to our culture and our mindset and how people look at our town as a destination. Those three things kind of forces people to think of Hagerstown as sort of a pass-through instead of a destination. That's one thing. It's more of a culture and a mindset I think we need to get over. Second drawback would be some of the, I call blight, or some of unused space downtown. The old hospital site, Central Chemical, some of the older buildings on Washington Street. Some of those I think also do a lot visually to affect sort of our mood and how we look at our hometown.
What has compelled you to file for this appointment? And what has changed in the last 12 months to file for this appointment as opposed to file for candidacy 12 months ago?
That's a great question. 12 months ago, I was commuting. I was a member of our bedroom commuter crew, so I was driving 70 miles to Hanover, Pennsylvania to work. So I really didn't have, say, the resource in terms of time to do that. Now that I'm working back in Hagerstown, about 9 months, a lot of what is going on in town I can see. I'm here most of the day working in town, hearing about it. So in the last 12 months, working back in town, having a lot of pride in that has been the change. What compelled me, it's been something I've been thinking about since I moved home. I saw a lot of progress and a lot of opportunity in 2007 when I moved home. There's a lot of excitement about downtown, and I'd like to be a part of a movement to continue that. I believe in some of the changes that have happened in the master plan that I read about online. I'd like to be a part of that in any way.
Anybody else?
You're familiar with the urban improvement plan?
I've read what's been in the Herald Mail, things that I've been able to get my hands on online.
Support, too expensive, not expensive? What's your position on it?
I support it in a sustainable fashion. I think that we have several different things in town that we've got to focus on, and as long as it's done without overlooking other things going on day to day, month to month, seasonally, strong supporter of it.
When each of us ran shortly ago for office, there were a number of hot button items that came up through that campaign process. And since we're, only 10 or 11 months removed, I guess I'm highly interested in each candidate's response to what I would consider those hot button items that we as candidates had to take somewhat finite positions on through the election process. And so I was going to ask a couple of them. The first is the one that seems ever present, the stadium. I'm sure you're aware of the various iterations of the stadium, but more specifically, do you support a stadium, and if so, do you support one downtown?
I support one downtown as long as it's part of an integrated master plan that's integrated with amenities, and then it's part of the community. A little aware of the situation with municipal stadium and water runoff and things that we'd have to tackle there. So I'm very supportive of a alternate location. I think it would be an amazing thing for the city of Hagerstown to have a baseball stadium downtown, but I think it needs integrated with everything else that we have going on. I think it's a coordinated effort that would make it successful. Being a resident of the Midwest, before I came home, I got to see some projects similar to what we're talking about, baseball stadiums put in cities that, a little bit of an urban decay issue. I've seen it done successfully, and I've seen it done where there was diminishing returns that didn't come as quickly as the community I'd hoped for.
Okay.
So I'm supportive if it's done the right way, yes.
Are you a member of the property and the landlords association?
No,
That's
I'm
what I
not.
guess we technically call it. The second associated with that is, do you support rental registration?
Yes, sir.
Obviously, the last couple of days that we've had a conversation, or not conversation, we had a single conversation. The Herald Mail has had a number of
3.5
articles.
minutes.
The tier tax proposal that was in the paper recently, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm developing my stance on that, and it being a new issue. I believe in equal taxation. I believe in fair taxation.
All
I
right.
feel as though we shouldn't overlook those that maybe cannot. We shouldn't unfairly tax those who can.
I guess associated with that, we completed our budget, first budget of this administration, so you have 3 budgets if you're selected. We have a history of budgetary constraint. Really, there's 2 sort of directions I think that folks take in those constraints, and one is increased taxes or decreased expenses, and specifically expenses associated with employee expenses, layoffs, and things like that. So faced with that type of budgetary deliberation, do you support maybe the best way to say it, are you not opposed to tax increases if that's what it takes, or would you be more supportive of employee reduction costs?
Non-employee reductions. I think an organization loses money reducing employee count in the near term. I've seen that commercially. I would feel that same way with the municipality, depending on the amount of shortfall.
Okay. Are you familiar, are you a member of any union? Are you familiar with union negotiations at all?
Yes, sir, and no, I'm not.
Okay.
The only professional organization I'm aware of that I'm a part of is the Society of Automotive Engineers. It's not considered a union. It's a social organization.
Okay. The last item that I have is, obviously I floated the idea of if the Suns were to move locations of looking to convey and transform that property into an indoor turf sportsplex. Is that an idea that you would?
Municipal stadium? I think that'd be an exciting opportunity. I think the land has some challenges, just from a technical perspective with my background. My feeling on properties like that and others in the city, so we have to find the uses that are most appropriate given the situation.
The last question I have is I wasn't going to ask it, but I think since when you gave your presentation, it sort of gave me some pause right away, and that's a pretty simple question. Do you own your home? And the reason I ask that is, you know, really like to have sort of an understanding, and especially, you know, with the job movement that you've experienced, you know, at any time.
Yeah.
Obviously, younger generations continue to have more flexibility in terms of just moving away entirely. So,
Fair question. I rent, I don't own. I'm trying to talk my landlord into selling to me.
okay,
I have been for the last year.
thanks.
I like the property.
Anybody else?
I have one last question. So we've been in office 1 year now. The four of us as an administration, where do you think that we failed, and how do you think that you can help that? Or where do you think that we have not thrived?
Okay. And I have an interesting answer. Social media is a blessing and a curse. I'd like to think as a council member, I would represent those that don't have time necessarily engage during the day in social media and things like that. I think the council should find a way to engage the millennials as much as possible. We have, even in industry, coming retirement in the baby boomer generation, and Gen X has a lot on its shoulders. We're very much a sandwich generation. We have to support our parents and our children, very much like the baby boomers. And I think the millennials, and even in a sense in a city like Hagerstown, are an important generation to get them engaged in civic duty and to get them to see the importance of urban renewal. So however we engage that generation through social media, through any means possible, I think it's very important. Because if they turn away from small municipalities like Hagerstown, the issues we have now will just become amplified. Does that kind of answer your question?
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm not a big Facebook guy.
Yeah.
No other questions for Brian? Thank you, Brian.
One more real quick.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
think Lou kind of touched on it a little bit with the urban improvement project, but the greater plan, I'm lost for the words. Yes, the urban partners plan. How familiar are you with that plan, and are there aspects that you support in that, and likewise, are there aspects in that you don't believe in?
So to be fair, I don't understand the exact details of it. I have read through it in a leisurely sense, to be fair. There are certain projects that I believe current residents within city limits may or may not be interested in, or may or may not have the economy of scale to participate in. I think any urban renewal plan has got to include the demographic that lives in that city currently, and not so much who we want to live there, but who lives here today. That's kind of my general feel of that plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Next up is Paul Fry.
You're just going to start out asking that question since I'm sitting here.
Okay, I'm good with that.
What?
She said you wanted to just person start out asking that. After the mayor says, tell us about yourself, she's gonna ask that question one.
Since I was asked in 2006.
Segue.
Yeah, segue them.
Kristen, good afternoon.
How are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
They don't walk.
Lou, I saw you this afternoon.
Yes, sir.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Well, we're gonna make this, we're gonna try to stay on this time frame if possible, but, just give us a little bit about yourself and, I mean, because you're relatively new to Hagerstown area anyway,
Great.
not to the tri-state area.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this process.
as you may have read in the materials, I hopefully bring a business perspective. I've been, working in the private sector since I was in high school, and through my careers, I've been focused on others, service-focused. My first career was in restaurants, so we were customer-focused. My second career, I had a consultative business for about 8 years, worked with small businesses, so I was client-focused. And at the chamber, we're member-focused. And as a council member, we'd have to be citizen-focused. So I've had, I think, a great diverse background between working in a restaurant business to doing consulting work with over 75 businesses to working in a chamber world with working with a number of businesses and nonprofits in the community. So I would look forward to another opportunity to do some public service, really focus on Hagerstown, helping us grow as a community.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and open it up to council questions. Emily, you wanna hit your
Sure.
first two?
What are the two major issues facing the city, and how do you plan to address them?
I think the budget, I know that the budget season is here. I think that's an important area. As a municipality, have limited opportunities for revenue and probably more expenses. So I think that's an important issue. To address it, there may be some creative ways how to generate more revenue, obviously private sector, more businesses, to build a tax base. There may be some opportunities to do some things in public-private partnership to bring more revenue, bring more citizens and more visitors to the community. So I think that's one area, and those are some of the things I would do. I think the second important issue, and Emily, you mentioned it in an open letter to the editor, I think we can be our own worst enemy. I've said that when now Governor Hogan came before he was elected, 3 weeks before the election, and we gave him a little tour downtown. He said, what can we do to help Hagerstown and Washington County? I said, well, the first thing you can do is start talking about the good things here in Hagerstown and what we're doing. And I don't think he'd ever been in the Maryland Theater, so we walked him over to the Maryland Theater, we showed him Barbara Ingham School. I think there's just so many good things going on. I think we need to enhance the public relations and the branding of Hagerstown. I think, like any community, we have our issues to deal with, and that's okay. So does every business, so does every nonprofit. So I think that's the number two thing, is look at a branding, our public relations outreach, and talk about all the great things happening, and still address the areas that we need to address.
Next.
What's changed in the last 12 months that has you seeking this appointment as opposed to following for candidacy yourself 12 months ago? I guess what's changed
Sure.
since then to where we're at now?
I've been thinking about public service for about 10 years, and in my former community, I was going to run for the alderman seat, and I was a member of the chamber there. I was vice president, and I thought at that point I might be president of that chamber, and maybe that wasn't going to work. So at that point, I said, probably wait. So timing is important. I think I was still relatively new to the community, even 12 months ago. We have a new home now with the chamber. We're getting our feet on the ground there. And so I think the opportunity is here to say, I want to perform some public service. Here's an opportunity. If this for some reason doesn't work out, I would consider running for office in the future. I met with our board a Monday ago a week and said, look, if you don't think this is right for me as a chamber president, then I won't do it, because I do like working in the chamber, I do like working in the community. And they said unanimously, no, we think it's a good connection. We think it's good for the chamber, we think it's good for the city. So I think what's changed is timing, and it's a year later now, and I think we're more settled at the chamber. It's one more year under my belt here in Hagerstown. So that's been the big change for me.
Okay. Thank you.
Paul, we all inherently have conflicts of interest. I live, own a home, pay taxes, work downtown, so we all have our own interest. However, I think it jumps out that the chamber is a very active participant versus like being on the board of the Maryland Theater, which creates conflicts too, because Maryland Theater wants the city to give money. But I think of things like, one of the issues that is up for discussion, and I emphasize that word, is the two-tiered, tax program, the rental registration program. Are you and the chamber both comfortable with the potential for you taking a different position as a council member than the chamber itself takes on specific issues?
Short answer is yes. You know, I report to a board. The first thing they teach you in chamber school is the organization is not yours, it belongs to the board. So we have a board, we have a board chair. And we've had some of those discussions, not knowing what the conflicts could be, but to talk about them, to seek counsel with either city attorney and or the ethics commission and or a board. As a private citizen, you know, I have opinions. As a council member, I have opinions. And as a, you know, chamber representative, I have opinions. I think it's actually good because of the connections I have and the chamber has with nonprofits, with the folks who have rental properties in the private sector, with government entities. So are there potential for conflicts? Yes. I feel confident. I have a track record, I think, going back many, many years that's easily checked, that I'm not politically based for these things. It's, I always say, what's right, not who's right, and having robust discussions and having diversity. And, you know, I'm an optimist, and there's pessimists. You know, optimists invent the airplanes, pessimists invent the parachutes. So I think you need to have that good, diverse conversation, and I'm happy to do it and state for the record, here's what the decision is and here's why. And really getting feedback from the population, from the citizens.
Right.
So, you're welcome.
When we were running for office, obviously as candidates, you know, with different venues and forums, and requests for positions, you know, we were asked questions on specific, what I'll call hot button items. So I want to go down sort of that list in my mind of what some of those hot button items might have been or are still now, just to see if you can give me an answer where you might land on any of those. The UIP is at the top. Obviously, I don't even have to ask that one. You know, I
Two
think
thumbs up.
Yeah, it's
I
obvious.
think one reason, the main reason is it's a group effort, and there's
Yeah.
lots of partners, so I think you're right, that's an easy one for me.
The second is, are you a member of a union? And do you have any specific position on the union?
I'm not a member of the union, any union. I've not been a member of the union, which isn't good or bad, that's just fact. You know, I probably need to bone up on the benefits of unions. I know there's benefits of being in the union. I will say from the private sector, you know, my former boss would say, you know, if you take care of your folks, in many industries, there's no need for a union. However, I have daughters who teach in Frederick County, they're part of a union, so I know there's benefits. So I would have to study more if there's issues and what the benefits are.
The third item is, obviously you're familiar with the stadium discussions, and so very basically, do you support the idea of a stadium downtown?
I would say I'm open to the conversation. Again, I don't have probably the facts and figures that you do on the council, Mr. Mayor, you have, and Madam Administrator, you do. I'm open to it, and why I'm open to it is the possibility of, this is one of those maybe revenue streams, maybe. I'm also open to, I know there's conversation about an indoor sportsplex that could also be beneficial. So I'm open to those things. I don't have a decision personally. Again, I report to a board, and we ask questions of the business community and what are their thoughts. So.
The other item is, obviously, you're probably aware of our budget constraints from time to time, and especially of the last 10 years. And we've had to make some hard decisions, and they often rest either on tax increases or employee layoffs and cost reductions. Given that sort of position, do you have a leaning one way or the other?
So I couldn't pass a test tomorrow on your 500-page budget that I read through. But I did look at it. I did look at where the expenses are and the revenues are. You know, I will say I think there are creative opportunities to look at both those areas. I don't have a preference one way or the other. I'm a taxpayer, first of all. And so maybe like the next person, I'm not thrilled with tax increases, and I think we need to look at the whole budget. again, I worked in the private sector my whole career. The chamber's a nonprofit, but it's a tax status, not a business plan. We have to have a surplus every year, so we run it like a business. I think you have to make, in some cases, tough decisions. I think, however, you need to get input from the community, from the staff, from businesses. I just think there's a lot of opportunities to look at it. So I don't take it one way or the other. However, as a business owner and someone who had to run a $20 million restaurant company, we've had to make tough decisions. We're profit-based, and while the municipality is not a profit-based entity, it is, you have to have a surplus. So I think there's opportunities for both. I don't think you can save your way to prosperity. I think you need to make investments in the community and what you do, and that calls for different
Let me ask
decisions.
it this way then, are you an absolutist when it comes to the idea of tax increases? In other words, is it completely off the table to you?
I'm not an absolutist about anything, because I just think there's so many variables, it's so complex. Every issue you've brought up, there's, you know, you have a lot of stakeholders, including 50,000 citizens, of which I'm one. So I'm just not an absolutist. I'm not sure that's good or bad. That's not me.
Code enforcement, obviously, is an issue that arises, and pretty basically, do you support rental registration?
And so if that means, as simply as you have to register your rentals and comply to permit, I think so, yeah, I think, you know, that's important, that people are, for the protection of the citizens and being consistent. I think that's one of the roles of government, to make sure we're consistent there. Without knowing all the details, generally, I would say yes.
Okay. Are you a member of the Property and Landlords
I
Association?
am not. But I have friends who are, you know, and I have friends who are not.
And you're obviously familiar with the Urban Partners Plan. And not to steal Paul's question on that, but you're familiar with the Urban Partners Plan. Do you have any parts of that do you support or oppose?
What I support is, first of all, the collaboration and the best use of all the resources that everyone can share. That's what I support. I know there's been some changes here in the last couple of days that I'm not,
I think in all fairness, that Paul is misunderstanding the question.
Yeah.
There's the urban improvement.
And not the urban project,
program,
but the plan, that we wrote,
project.
the 8 items.
yes,
Maybe I'll use that word for
yeah,
now.
thank you, yes. And again, I reviewed them quickly last couple of days, and there's some ones that are moving forward I would agree with, and I think it's important there's a vision, and let's keep moving forward. If we need to modify any of them and tweak them because things change, I think we're gonna look at it. But I think generally speaking, they're good programs.
Obviously, there was an article about the tiered tax proposal. Do you have any, number one, are you aware of what the proposal is? Maybe as Harold might have defined it. And do you have any thought?
I'm aware of
in
it.
favor or against?
I'm aware of it. I understand the discussion about it, and again, I haven't talked to enough people on both sides of the issue. I mean, as a citizen, I say, you know what, my neighbor, there's 4 people living there, and they pay one thing, and I'm not. However, you know, what are the folks who have those rental properties, what do the business owners think? So I'd have to do some more homework, so I don't have one way or the other, but I am aware of it.
Last question is, do you own or rent?
What's the last question?
Do you own a house?
I own, I do own, and I do not rent any that I own.
Well, in all fairness, on the tier tax structure, there really isn't anything to investigate yet, because unfortunately, we had a 3.5-minute conversation about something, and that's all the farther we've gotten, so.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so. If you have particulars, I'd like to hear them, because I don't have them, so.
I absolutely don't. I've talked to folks on both sides of it, and just.
Yeah, I get a
last
lot
couple
of
days.
opinions over the last couple of days too, and most of them have no idea that what they're talking about isn't even involved.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anything else for Paul?
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
Did you already ask your failure question?
I'm sorry, I do have one more question, I forgot. So we've been in office 1 year now, as a body.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Feels like eternity.
What do you think that we have failed at, or not been so great at, and how can you help us fix that issue over the next 3 years?
I don't think failed's the right word. I think we can do more of the outreach, and believe me, I don't know, because I've not sat in your position or any elected position. there's a lot of responsibility, a lot of time, a lot of things you're doing, plus you're trying to do your daytime jobs and work with your families and other things. So I think fail is the wrong word. I think we could continue to do more outreach. Again, I have a history of working with collaboration, and I've done some focus group work with Main Street. So I think between this body and the staff, doing more outreach, gathering more information, there's a lot of stakeholders. I think, again, I think it's been a great thing as a chamber president to be able to get into the community and meet a lot of people. So I think more outreach, and again, I think this body, working through the staff, is this public relations and branding of Hagerstown. I think we could do better there, and I think most businesses could, and most organizations, I think we really could. We have some opportunities.
Thank you.
Do I have time for one question?
Yeah.
So you fast forward 1 year from this decision, you made a decision on whom you're gonna put in the vacancy or vacancies if a second one comes up. What will success look like to you for the person you selected? You would say, man, that was a good selection. What would that look like? Some characteristics or some things that have happened?
Well, mine is simple. Mine is so simple. Having the ability to have an open mind on every subject we talk about and, getting your information, making an educated decision, that's, to me, paramount upon anything.
Okay.
Mine's simple too. I mean, mine's not being a one-horse pony. I hate when a person runs on a singular sole item and just beats that to death for 4
It's like a
straight
rented
years.
mule.
I need to work with somebody who has the appropriate demeanor.
If I knew,
The appropriate demeanor, willing to compromise on issues, the world goes round.
I agree with all those, but I also agree with, we need to be doing more outreach. So it'd be nice to have a candidate who's willing to step out there and be very vocal publicly and be a cheerleader, for lack of a better word. It's important.
Similar to what I believe the mayor indicated and Lou said as well, is having a cohesive unit that is all in agreement of moving Hagerstown forward together, so.
great. All right, well, thank you. I
Thank you.
Thank you.
appreciate your time.
Yep.
Does it matter if we sat out here once we've been
No,
heard?
no, no,
Okay.
problem at all.
Tell them we're finished, and unless you're going to the next person.
That would be Shelley. The door locked.
I thought for sure.
Are you kidding me?
I thought she would definitely bring up like ordinance or PLOTs or something like that.
Down here.
Hello.
All right, Shelley. Hi, welcome. Just real quick, a little bit of overview about yourself, and we'll have some questions from the council.
Okay, thanks for having me. So Shelley McIntyre, I live in the city of Hagerstown and have lived in the city of Hagerstown for, almost 20 years. I am the mother of 2 children and 2 bonus children who all live in Washington County, my bonus children do. And my husband and I opened a business in 2010, heating and air conditioning business. We chose to open our business in the city of Hagerstown. It was very important to us. We love Hagerstown and want to continue to live in Hagerstown. So, yeah. I am a board member of Brooks House. I am a board member of Leadership Washington County, and that's a little bit about me.
Cool. Emily, you want to start?
So what do you think are the 2 major issues facing Hagerstown, and how do you plan to address them?
I think that the major issues in Hagerstown are, number one, the drug issue. And I think that the second issue is the crime. I think actually those 2 things go hand in hand, which really leads to a third issue, which is public safety. So I think those 2 issues kind of lead into the public not feeling safe downtown. How do I plan to fix that? That's a big problem, and a lot of big things have to happen. I think, to control the drug issue, I think, downtown Hagerstown think of it as Inner Harbor. And you wouldn't put in the Inner Harbor, you wouldn't put, social services, and you wouldn't put the public defender's office downtown into the Inner Harbor. So we should treat it like that, maybe moving those types of things out to the outskirts, much like what Brooks House is doing on the outskirts of the town. I think that as far as, when it comes down to the crime, I'd love to be able to work with the police department and be able to, come up with creative ideas in order to, control the crime. I think that the public safety, I think that one of the things that could be helpful is to create more events. I think that people feel safe in crowds, so creating more events where there are the ability to be in a crowd and familiarize the residents with the city of Hagerstown and getting them comfortable and familiar with, their environment.
What has changed in the last 12 months from where we sit now? I guess it's compelled you to file for this appointment as opposed to filing for candidacy and running for yourself as a candidate 12 months ago. What's changed in that last year?
I went through Leadership Washington County, and I was able, which is an amazing program. I saw how much I could give back in the town. I saw that, what Washington County has to offer and what the city of Hagerstown has to offer. I've always been extremely passionate and wanted to give back and wanted to do more. I'm not the kind of person that just joins something and just, just to say that I'm on the board. I make changes. Through Leadership Washington County, I created a Be Nice to Hagerstown event. My class does quarterly service projects. I think that it would be a privilege to be able to serve with you. I think that, the current council has done an amazing job already. I think that, Main Street and the urban development and, the cultural trail, all of those things are amazing. I've seen great things happen in this town since the past 12 months even. So I think that I could be a big part of that. So this was an opportunity and I decided to go for it.
In the next couple of months, we may very well be faced with one of two choices, and that is either a tax rate increase or laying off or furloughing personnel. If you had to choose between one or the other, where would your leanings be? And I guess most importantly, is there a red line that you would never cross, like raising taxes or laying off people, or how do you feel about that?
Well, I think that in my business, I control the operations of our business, so it's not just getting better service or improving our service or customer service. It's really, I'm faced with tough decisions that, I recognize that the people in our company, the people that work for us are the heart of our company. It's much like the taxpayers, and I really have to do what's best for our company. And sometimes I'm faced with, very difficult decisions that I have to make. I would really have to do the research to make sure, to see where I fell, rather than making a hard answer. Sorry.
No, that's a fair answer. That's fine.
Yeah.
When we were running for office as candidates less than a year ago, or about a year ago, now we were asked through that process to basically take positions on what I would consider more hot-button items within the community, both at that time and some ongoing now. So I'm going to ask, I guess, one, if you're familiar with some of these items, and two, if you have a specific position for or against a number of those. So The first is, are you aware of the urban improvement project, and if so, do you support the city's role in it?
I am aware of the urban improvement project. I think that, the city does a very good job of, keeping that going, moving it forward. Again, I think that doing more research, I've looked at the budget, all 426 pages, not all of it, but a lot of it, to try to see, get some take on it. And I think that making sure that we're, doing the research and looking at other good examples and failures, I think that, that's important in order for me to understand the forward progress that the urban development needs to, how it needs to go.
Okay. Are you a member of a union, and do you have negotiation experience with the union?
I am not a member of the union.
Okay. Do you have any position on unions in general?
I don't. I don't have enough familiarity with unions. We're lucky, HVAC in Washington County and the tri-state, for us in service is relatively simple, so, and we do a really good job.
Are you aware of, I'll say, the history of the stadium project, and if so, do you support a stadium downtown?
I am aware of the stadium. I think that I don't have a specific stance on the stadium. I do think that, let's see, I think that more research has to happen. I think that we need to poll the people that would go to the stadium and decide whether we think that, again, if it's going to increase taxpayers and, their responsibility for a stadium, I think that that's very important. I think that doing the research and looking at, and I've looked at other stadiums that have been built in other cities across the country and looked at their failures, and without knowing all of the details behind it. In theory, a multi-purpose facility sounds great to me, in theory, but I need to, as a business owner, I really need to understand, exactly the good and the bad and the ugly of it.
All right. Do you, I'm certain you're familiar with code enforcement. Do you have any specific position? Do you support rental registration?
Rental registration?
Yeah, the city's rental registration program.
I actually don't know much about the rental registration
Okay.
program. I'm familiar with the codes and, what it takes in order to bring a building up to code in order for someone to rent it or just someone to buy it. So is that what
Okay.
you're referring to?
No, he's talking
The
about
code-
landlord registration, which means that we have a team of code compliance people who go and inspect rentals
I see.
on a
Yes.
routine basis. If someone moves out, we send them, they go in and inspect.
So it's like an annual program they're required to
Right.
participate in.
I am familiar with that. I don't know, I don't know all the details of that I'm sorry.
Okay. Are you a member of the Property and, I think it's the Property and Landlords Association?
No, sir.
One idea that I have pitched for some time is if the stadium were to move, that the city would convey and work with the private developer to transform the current stadium property into an indoor turf sportsplex. Is that an idea that you have any thought of?
I mean, again, I think that, there's a lot of soccer players in the county. So I think, it seems
Yeah,
like it at least.
there are.
I am not a sports person. I played the flute. So, I don't know if that's really, I think that anything that's going to bring, new homeowners downtown and, and help to revive, because that's what we need. We need to, promote homeownership. And I think that if that means a multi-purpose stadium and if all of the numbers line up and the balance looks good, then yeah.
Okay. Speaking of homeowners, obviously there was an article recently about this very brief conversation we had about a tiered tax structure. Are you familiar with that? And if so, do you have any thought on it?
I am familiar with it, about as familiar as you guys are. So I think that what I would be interested to see is where the excess revenue, where it's going to be invested, because that wasn't mentioned. I also think it would, if it's possible, again, we want to create homeownership downtown. It revitalizes, it, creates safety, and, when there's a homeowner downtown, it reduces crime. They take care of their property. I think that, is there a possibility to give rebates? Is there a possibility to do rent-to-own to encourage, it's not going to be a favorable decision for the tenants, so how can we make it favorable?
Last question I have is, do you own or rent your home?
I own.
Okay.
It's really small, so. we've
Mine
decided to-
feels really small.
We've decided to live here, and it's still really small. All my children have friends. They keep bringing people over, so it's still tiny.
Anybody else?
Yeah, over our first year in office, what do you think that we as a body have failed at or need to do more of? And how can you help us with that?
I think that you guys been putting yourself out there. I mean, it's been amazing. I think that, being in the public eye, and everyone, at least the people that I talk to, they all know who you are. I mean, I think that that's wonderful. I think that that's more than what I've seen. Social media can do amazing and scary things at the same time. So I think that, I don't know if there's anything, is there ever a wrong decision? I don't know. I mean, I think that you guys do what's best for the taxpayers and for the people that you're representing. So I don't know if I could pick something that has been wrong. You do it, with everyone else's best interest, I think.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, Shelley.
Absolutely. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Penny nine.
I'm not gonna ask her my question.
No,
There's really no point.
I don't think
We're just
so.
gonna glaze right over that one.
Oh, yeah.
Mine's run last year.
I got you. I'm
Just swing right back.
I'm picking up. No, you should.
Hello, Penny.
Oh, it's a low chair. Okay.
I've asked everybody else just to give us a brief synopsis of who they are. Everybody knows you're here at this table, but if you want to go ahead and do that, go right ahead.
I'm Penny Nye. I have been a council member in the city of Hagerstown on and off for 12 years. And people who look at me and say, you put your name back in there again, call me crazy. And I said, well, crazy I may be.
I've heard that a time or two.
Crazy I may be, but the love of the city is mine. I've been asked to do other things, and I said, no, that's not me. So public safety, back in 2001, I ran on, and I continue to drive that home. And hopefully, if appointed, it's going to continue on with me, because we still have a lot of problems.
Emily, go ahead.
Well, what do you think are the two major issues that we're facing right now, and how do you plan to address them?
The two major issues is, again, trying to keep this town very safe. Public safety is a main factor. And there are more and more that I talk to that feel that it is not as safe as what it could be. And again, with constraints that we have with our budget, it does not allow us to be able to have the number of police officers that I would like to see. I think also the economic development part of the city of Hagerstown has not come up to speed where it should be. I really feel we need to have feet on the ground in order to go after economic development, and we cannot sit back and wait. It's killing us. The assessments in the city continue to be at a stall. And with that, we're not showing our city employees or our citizens that we can do more of what we need to do.
Paul, you have a different question?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Lou?
Yeah, I feel Penny, I've worked with Penny for 12 years. I don't need to.
Well, I just wonder if you had a
find out
question
what
about the U.
No, I know, I mean, I don't need
Okay.
to find out what positions, I know what they are.
I mean, she was involved in the urban
Right,
partners thing.
that's
I mean,
right,
that's,
yeah,
so
I
she,
do.
we know where she stands on
Right.
that, so.
No, that's right.
But do you remain in support of the project,
Of what
of
project?
the urban improvement project? I assumed, I just wanted,
Yeah, so
As it continues to grow, yeah.
And my questions are lean toward, again, as candidates, when we ran for office, a year ago, we had specific positions that we had to take on certain items, and, I mean, I can save, the folks in the audience at home some time by skipping most of these, but for me, there are 4 items out of that 9 that I'd still like some response to. The first is the Urban Partners Plan. Are there any specific components of those 8 catalyst items that
Oh,
you
Kristen, I don't have
support or
I don't have
oppose?
that 8 in front of me.
Okay.
There were those that I didn't support, but I do not have it in front of my
Okay.
face, so I can't say, that I remember all of that.
All right. Recently, there was an article about the idea of a tiered tax structure. Are you familiar with it, one, and do you have any position one way or the other?
I think it should happen. I think that we are now at a situation in this city of not having revenue. We need to get it somehow. And if this is how we have to do it, we're gonna have to do it. Look, the fight has been around this table, whether or not we raise taxes. I mean, this went on and on and on. And good times, oh, you know what, yeah, we can do it now. But we have been so stale in trying to get revenue that our town is not succeeding like it should.
Next question is, you're familiar with the stadium
Oh,
issue
my,
over time?
Kristen, I really didn't think that you would be the one to bring it up.
I'm just gonna ask it. One is, do you support a stadium, and if so, do you support one downtown?
Do I support a stadium? The only way that I'm gonna support a stadium is if the team that's coming in here, the owner, is gonna build it and gonna maintain it, okay? Otherwise, then you better be getting federal money and state money, because right now, the city of Hagerstown cannot afford to take a stadium on.
Okay. And the last is the idea that I posed probably toward the end of our last term, which was if the stadium and the Suns were to move, and that property became available for the city's reuse, the idea of putting an indoor turf sportsplex on that property.
I have no problem with that. I would still rather see a stadium go out there, but again, everybody's saying can't happen, so. And we would end up having to have another study, and I'm tired of looking at studies.
I don't need to ask, I don't either, I know. I'm good.
Just for the record, what were the other questions that you're not asking?
Sure.
Co-compliance or landlord.
Yeah, do you support rental registration?
Yes?
Are you a member of the Landlords Association?
No? I'm not a landlord, so therefore I wouldn't be part of.
Well, now
But
it's
I was
property
accused of
owners.
being one, but I wasn't. Okay.
And do you own or rent your home?
Own,
And I think that's it.
Questions of,
Oh, you're familiar with unions and union negotiations?
yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean,
the other
that's-
question you didn't ask, if there was a,
is there one
Penny,
last?
you faced the choice between
That's your
having to
question,
do
I'm not-
layoffs or tax increases, do you have a position?
Tax increase, sorry. Right now, we're struggling to keep afloat.
Yeah,
And our
yeah,
worker
clear at the
bees, we
beginning.
have hardly any there. This town does not just get clean on air. And unless we have volunteers, and if you look around us, there's not many volunteers that are willing to get out to even clean leaves up off of the streets. therefore to do anything else. And that is a sad situation. And I will tell you another one. Myself and two other ones who did the tree lighting, the refreshments over at City Park for almost 15 years, when asked to get volunteers to help to do baking, and this was with organizations that was in the city, couldn't get anyone. So, yes, I'm sorry. That's the way I feel. Okay?
I baked one year,
I know you
but then
did.
everybody asked me for recipes, and I thought that was
I know,
something for me.
you know. Doesn't matter, at least you baked.
So over our first year here as a body, what do you think that we have failed at or need to do more of? And how can you help us?
I just want to see economic development move more quickly. I really think that we need to go outside and we need to try to pull it in. And from the time that I actually had been on council, it was a matter of it still wasn't moving as quickly as what it could. And I was really pleased with one individual that did come into the economic part of it in hopes that from the knowledge of what he carried, we were going to be able to see more come in. And unfortunately, he left us too early. And I think that that really would have been something that would have made the city much more as far as a part of economic development. Because right now, it's just not cutting it. Coming in with a marijuana, okay, doing whatever, and then the other one, that was the ice cream plant, we still are not gonna generate that kind of money that we need to generate. And God knows I don't wanna be, and I think it's Montgomery County, if I was watching the TV right, where we would start selling medical marijuana, because now the big focus is the green stuff. So obviously, the green stuff is more important to the ones that are out there than I think the ones that are actually having to take it. And that's government, unfortunately.
What type of economic development initiatives would you like to see the city to take?
I just would like to see more businesses come in here and businesses that are going to stay here. When I first came into office, we actually had over 100 businesses that had walked away. And honestly, Paul, I do not know how many in my terms went away, but I know the last go-round, we had a lot too that weren't able to succeed. I think the whole connect with economic development needs to also reach out to the businesses that are here. I think there is a lack of that communication. How are you doing? You know, and I know that firsthand by people that I had actually worked with. And we need to have more of that contact, that personal contact. But I think that we can go after businesses, and far be it from me, I never graduated to, okay, know this kind of stuff, but I know that if you put that feet on the ground, you can go and look. I know back there was the person who did the Inner Harbor, and a friend of mine actually had gotten him to come here to town, and was hope that something was going to happen on that end. And unfortunately for that part, the person that then was economic development was given the go on, oh, he doesn't want to look about South Potomac Street because all of that has been taken care of. And unfortunately for the city, we were then snowballed for over 10 years because it went nowhere. And we need somebody with that whole positive outlook and somebody that's got that personality to be able to show that Hagerstown is the place to come. This is what we do have to offer. And I don't know if they're really getting it across.
Thank
We
you.
just need to have it.
Anybody else? Thank you, Ben.
Okay,
Thank you, Patty.
now bear with me because I walked in, but I may not walk out.
Colin V. Ploskaroo.
The only reason I asked that was here, I forgot, so I knew she
Yeah. Oh, I thought about that too, like, I would figure it'd be fresh enough in people's minds, but I was trying to hit the new stuff. No, I agree.
Welcome, Mr. Ploskaru. As everybody else, give us a short summary of you.
Give you what?
A short summary of you.
Well, my name is Colin Plosker. I've lived here in town for 14 years. I am very committed to a lot of the things that I think have happened in Hagerstown, that the city government has done, both during your administration as well as the previous administration. I am a huge believer in all the various downtown development projects that have gone on, and really my commitment is, having lived here in town for all this period of time, is I want to be involved. I want to be a part of making a change, and I want to be a part of making Hagerstown become what it can be.
Okay. Emma?
What do you think are the two major issues facing the city, and how do you plan to address them?
So it's very difficult to put your finger on the things that need to occur. I think economic development, so certainly bringing in more opportunity for for the folks that live in town, developing downtown, certainly helping Barbara Ingram, as well as the Arts and Education District in general. Government is not a vehicle for creating opportunity. Government can encourage opportunity by putting in place programs that help private enterprises thrive. It's very difficult to say that we can do X, Y, and Z, and those are going to lead to some sort of development. I think, however, the government needs to be the vehicle that allows opportunity and allows development to occur organically.
Paul?
No, I'm good, because I'm not gonna ask him the same question.
Okay, yeah, there's no reason to ask that question. Lou?
The question was, why you didn't run last time, basically. So you weren't good for that question. Colin, if, you know, one of the big issues in the city has been the budget. Do you have any philosophical feelings or strong feelings if you got on here and found out in 3 months you really had to make a choice between whether we're gonna raise the tax rate or whether we're gonna do layoffs? If those are the two choices, do you have an opinion on either one?
So this is going to be to some degree an uneducated opinion, because I obviously am not involved enough to be able to have an educated opinion. To me, it is always a very difficult decision to make between layoffs, and obviously I think the one thing that I've appreciated about living in Hagerstown is that the fact that a lot of our services are run by the city leads to those services being done very efficiently and very well. Now, is there an opportunity to maybe save money? Potentially. I'm never a fan of raising taxes unless it's absolutely needed. So I think it's always a decision that has to be made by looking at the situation and making sure that we are, first of all, being as efficient as we can be in what we do. I think layoffs are certainly an extreme measure. So I think getting to that point where you're laying folks off is something that needs to be considered very, very heavily, because you're dealing with somebody's livelihood and everything else, and plus people who have been dedicated to the city. By the same token, I think raising taxes is a very difficult thing. So that also has to be taken very judiciously. I think if you're getting into the point where you're making that decision, it really comes down to a decision based on whether we're doing the things that we need to be doing and we're doing those efficiently, and if we are in a position where we need to raise revenue, then raising taxes may be the right way to do it, but it needs to be approached very judiciously.
Thank you.
When we were running for office, obviously, as you recall, we were asked as candidates during that time to take positions on a number of different hot button items of the time, and even some other items since then have come up. What I'd like to do is ask your position on a number of those more succinct items, and so I'm just going to go through the list here. And the first is, are you aware of the urban improvement project, and if so, do you support the city's participation in it?
So I am kind of high level aware of it. I do support it.
Are you a member of a union, and are you familiar with union negotiation?
I'm not a member of a union. I have, when I was running for office, I talked to a number of the unions here locally.
And you're familiar with the iterations of the stadium project. Do you support a new stadium, and in addition to that, do you support a stadium downtown?
So I, again, and not to get too long-winded on this, I'm a fan of anything that attracts traffic downtown. I think a stadium project has to be approached very carefully, because I think that there are potential ways of doing a stadium project that could be detrimental, as well as ways of doing a stadium project that could be very beneficial. So I think that has to be weighed based on the exact approach and the exact plan that's being implemented.
Okay. And then the next is, are you familiar with our code enforcement process, and do you support rental registration?
So I think the code enforcement process here in Hagerstown is a hot button issue. And the reason for that is I think sometimes we can be a little over strenuous in the way that we approach code enforcement. I think sometimes that can be a detriment to businesses, to getting things off the ground. While I understand the reason for having the codes in place and for enforcing them, I think that there's opportunity in that process to streamline things.
What about the rental registration program in particular? Do you support that?
I'm not overly familiar with the rental registration process.
The rental registration where landlords are required to register their rentals with the city each year for an inspection process.
So I would certainly be in support of that, because I think it is very important to make sure. One of the criticisms that you will hear from folks on the street is that we have a culture in town, I think, with some of the landlords where they're almost like slumlords, and forgive the language, but I think the registration program and some of the programs to sort of curtail the behavior of some of the landlords is probably a good thing. Now, is there room for improvement? Absolutely.
Okay. Are you a member of the Property and Landlords Association?
I'm not.
And obviously, you probably read an article about the idea of a tier tax structure recently in the paper that we've been kicking around. Are you familiar with that idea? And if so, do you have any thought on a tier tax structure between rentals and owner-occupied?
So, and you'll have to excuse me, I'm not overly familiar with the tier tax. So what is the premise there?
Where,
There isn't much.
yeah. The idea is rentals will be charged at a higher tax rate depending on their classification than what owner-occupied properties are.
For more units, not
Right.
single-family duplex.
Honestly, I'm not sure that I have an opinion on that.
Okay.
Again, I think overall, the real impetus here is to make sure that we are creating an opportunity for the city to succeed. So I think getting into the minutia requires a lot more research and being familiar with things. I don't really want to pontificate on something that I'm not very familiar with.
Okay. One of the ideas that I put forward fairly often is the idea if the stadium or the Suns were to move, that the city would look to utilize that property for an indoor turf sportsplex. Do you have any opinion on that?
So the one thing, and again, I've had a lot of diamondism in my own personal life, so I spend a lot of time downtown. Creating more facilities that are available for the downtown population, to keep them off, first of all, to give them something to do, to keep them off the streets, and keep them engaged and being a part of the community is something that I always support. I'm a huge fan of the Fairgrounds Park. I'm a huge fan of a lot of properties that have been developed that provide opportunity. I think it's a very good thing. And certainly, any of the facilities that we have downtown, if we repurpose them, would be a good thing to be able to turn those over to be accessible to the population.
Okay. And then, if you are familiar with the Urban Partners Plan or the 8 Catalyst projects, are there any parts of that plan that you are in favor or opposed of specifically?
Nothing that I'm opposed to, honestly.
Okay.
I think that we have done a very good job in implementing as much as we have done so far. There has been a lot of criticism, and which I don't agree with. I don't understand how no matter what you do, whether you're benefiting or detrimenting, you're going to be criticized by some section of the population. I think that comes with the territory. But I think you guys have done a very, very good job in implementing that, the pieces that you have.
And last question I have, do you own or rent?
I own. I have for 14 years now.
Over our first year as a body, what do you think that we have failed at or need to do more of? And how can you help us with that?
Outside of the rock garden that everybody criticized. No, actually, again, I think, and this is one of the reasons why I am running for council, or I'm submitting myself to be in council. I think I've been very proud of what Hagerstown city government has done. And I really can't think of, and again, Bob, I know you took over from Dave, but I think there's been a very smooth transition, and the one thing that is very consistent in city government here is you guys are doing the job for the city, and that's commendable. So I honestly can't really think of anything that you guys have done wrong. I certainly want to help you continue to do the things that you're doing right. Certainly think that developing the arts and entertainment district, I think all the work that's going on with Barbara Ingram, I think everything that's going on with the University of Maryland, hopefully building towards a more of a four-year campus here is important. And again, having lived in Hagerstown for 14 years, I've seen this town become something very different than it was 14 years ago. I remember coming up here when I was in high school. So I grew up in Frederick. Coming up here and Hagerstown was a very depressed place, and it's changed a lot. And I honestly am very proud of living up here, and I take that with a great deal of importance.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Joe, sorry.
Yep. You have 3 left. Why do you think we're moving slow?
I'll get them back on the restroom.
Oh, yeah.
Take like a quick, let's keep it rolling.
It's Bobby's birthday and we're leaving.
All right.
Take care, Penny.
Bye, Penny.
Well, Tara, tell us a little bit about yourself to kick it off.
How far back shall I go? Hi, thank you for having me, I appreciate it. I'm actually from Leicester, Maryland, so I grew up in Allegheny County.
and spent my formative years there. I went to Frostburg State University undergrad and came out of college, worked in the business world for a few years, and realized that my teaching degree was ill-placed and wanted to get another degree that would send me in a different direction. So went to Frostburg at their Frederick campus, which they no longer have, and received my MBA from there. I worked in supplemental education. I worked for a small company who reported on the worldwide lottery industry for a few years, and then I worked for an accounting firm in Frederick. And slowly inched my way back west after living in Baltimore for a little while, Frederick, and then came to Hagerstown in late '99, and got into teaching as an adjunct for Mount St. Mary's University in 2000. And that sort of is what really lit me up, and really enjoyed that, and taught for the next 12 years, 7 years at the Mount and 3.5 years at Shippensburg University. And slowly got involved in this community while I lived here. And the opportunity came to work where I lived, and so I sort of seized that opportunity to work for Leadership Washington County, and here I am.
Good. Emily?
What do you think are the two major issues facing the city, and how do you plan to address them?
Good question. I think the overarching issue sort of lends to all the other key issues. The negative self-perception that the community has, I think, is one of the biggest barriers that we have. You can, I think, drill down from there, whether you're talking about the opioid crisis, or you're talking about lack of development in the downtown, or you're talking about education rates or employment rates. I think that so much of that comes back to how we perceive ourselves and what we think we deserve, and our ability to then attract something better for ourselves. Your follow-up question, I think, Emily, was what would you do about that? I think, what I do on a day-to-day basis through leadership is to spread the message of what the community does have to offer. I think that, our role is to highlight the opportunities while also just critically discussing the challenges that our community faces. I think that's such a big part of it, is educating the community about what is possible and what already exists, but also then being realistic about the challenges that we face, and making sure that people really do understand what it is they're talking about or what they're being critical about.
I try to do that on a daily basis. Paul?
Tara, what's changed or compelled you to file for this appointment as opposed to run for candidacy 12 months ago?
That's a good question, too. So in 2016, in my professional life, we were preparing for Leadership Washington County's 30th anniversary, which spanned from July 1st of 2016 to June of 2017. So it would not have been fair to my organization or my singular colleague, there's two of us in our office, if I were to take on something like this at that time. So we successfully concluded our 30th anniversary year in June. We raised $100,000, which is a really big deal for our small organization. So the timing for me would not have been considerate to my job, to my organization, to which I'm very loyal. So that was what kept me from running at that time.
Sure, thank you.
What did you teach at Mount St. Mary's?
I taught at the time it was the Business, Economics, and Accounting Department. Now they have a School of Business. So I taught management and leadership courses.
Your master's degree is in?
Business administration.
I
was waiting for you to ask your budget question.
Oh, that's my budget question.
What's that?
So you get appointed, and in 3 months, you are facing down the barrel of either tax increase or employee layoffs. You have an opinion on how you handle that situation, which you favor, which you disfavor, or is there a absolutely would not do this?
No absolutes, absolutely. I don't have enough information to make an absolute one way or the other. I think that you have to weigh the bigger picture on, what employees are you talking about, what kind of tax hike are you talking about? Be far more details to consider than just a either or.
That's fine.
During the campaign, as candidates, 12 months ago, we were asked various questions and asked to take positions on specific sort of community hot button items. And so I wanted to ask you your position on a number of those items to get a feel for what that may have been, as well as on a couple of items that have arisen since that time.
Okay.
So the first is, are you familiar with the Urban Improvement Project? And if so, do you support the city's role in it?
I do. I am familiar with it, and I do support the city's role.
Are you a member of a union? Are you familiar with union negotiations?
I wouldn't say I have a lot of familiarity with union negotiations. I'm not currently a member of a union, and have not been privy to face-to-face negotiations with the union, no.
Are you familiar with the various iterations of the stadium project? I don't know who isn't at this point. And if so, do you support a stadium, and do you support a stadium downtown?
I'm somewhat familiar with the stadium project, very familiar with the previous proposition. I would support a stadium downtown, yes. Was that all of your questions, Kristen?
Yep.
Okay.
Are you familiar with the operations of our code enforcement? And if so, do you support our rental registration program?
Your what registration?
Rental registration program?
I think that it's important for landlords to be accountable, and I think the fee is something that's nominal enough that you at least can track who's owning what buildings.
Okay. Are you a member of the Property and Landlords Association?
No.
You may be familiar or may have seen the article recently in the paper regarding the idea of a tiered tax structure between owner-occupied and certain types of rentals. Are you aware of that current topic? And if so, do you support or oppose that idea?
I'm aware of the topic. To my understanding, it's been talked about maybe once amongst the council. It would seem like maybe it's been talked about a lot more by reading the paper. I think that it's certainly one option to increase the tax base, but I think that there is a lot more investigation to, I'm not sure what the success has been in Pocomoke City, for example. It's a much, much smaller municipality than we are, so I'm not sure if it's apples to apples, but I would think that it deserves consideration as a revenue generator, but I think you also have to look at what's the overall goal. Is the goal home ownership, or is it just simple revenue generation?
Okay. Are you familiar with the Urban Partners Plan? And if so, are there any of those 8 catalyst projects that you are in support of, or I guess more importantly, in opposition of?
I am. I participated in this room, in fact, in some of the breakout groups as the urban partners were in town for several of their sessions, getting the community's input on how to prioritize those projects and how to finalize them into what ended up being the final 8. I think certainly the cultural trail has been the most visible of those projects. And then, you know, I think several of those dovetail with the UIP, with supporting the theater, supporting SMH. So I think there's a lot of ways that they overlap. It seems like there would be opportunity there to show how those 2 plans can kind of work in concert together. Was your question if I'm in support of it, Kristen?
Well, more importantly, if there are any of those 8 that you felt you were generally in opposition to.
Oh, not necessarily, no.
Okay. And then one of the ideas that I've proposed is if the stadium does move, the Suns do move, conveying and transforming the current stadium property into an indoor turf complex. Is that an idea that you have any opinion on?
It seems like a creative use of the space, and absolutely something that would get a lot of use. I've certainly heard that there's a lack of indoor sports arenas in this community, unlike some of our neighboring towns like Frederick or north of here. Seems creative.
And then the last question, do you own or rent?
My home?
Mm-hmm.
Own.
Over our first year as a body, what do you think that we have failed at or could do more of? How can you help us there?
Oh, gosh. I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to say that you've failed at anything. I think also a year is a tough litmus test, especially What's that?
Nothing.
Wish you could tell the people what.
Yeah, yes, I do read some of those comments. Especially when you have a couple new council members coming on, there's got to be a mayor coming back into office, and there's got to be time for you to figure out how you work together and, you know, building consensus and what is your vision. So I think that's a tough way to characterize it, as sort of, you know, failures. I do think that that's the most important thing, is figuring out how you can best work together, because ultimately that's the point of being here is, you know, how do you, 5 people plus a mayor come around the table and listen, but also have a vision and move forward in a way that respects the people of the community, but also does the best for the community that you know how, and with the budget that you have, being realistic about that as well. Sure.
Anybody else? Thank you, Derek.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Derek.
Jeannie Singer. Gosh, we're moving too fast. We're 2 minutes ahead of schedule.
Hey there.
Hi, Jeannie.
How's everybody? Feels like it's been ages since I've seen y'all.
All right, just briefly, a little bit about yourself.
I have been a city resident for 18 years now. We moved in just when Abby was born, so thankfully I can always remember how old she is. I'm a tax attorney in town. I've been very involved in the community since we've moved here, on a number of boards, doing a lot of pro bono work. I appear to have an ability to say no for those types of things. And when this opportunity opened up, I thought it was a different way that I could serve the community. I feel silly talking about myself. I feel like you guys all know this stuff.
We all get asked that same question every time we run for office, so.
I feel
Emily?
like a kid sitting in the seat because I can't quite reach the table or the
Don't say
floor.
that. I think it was, somebody made that decision. 'cause
Yeah, I was gonna say,
everybody commented.
Somebody's playing mind games with us.
So what do you think are the 2 major issues facing the city, and what would you like to do to address them?
So I think they're mostly economic. I think, and you all know that I've been very involved with On Track, the educational initiative in town. I think one of the things that we really struggle with is the educational attainment levels in the community. It makes it very difficult for those city residents to be able to sustain themselves long-term, and then it just kind of cycles in on itself. And then I think, like many other small towns around the country, we're struggling with the opioids and the drug issues, and how are we going to handle that? Unfortunately, given what I see around the rest of the country, I don't know that there's easy answers to that. I think it's easier for us to fix the first one.
Paul?
Jeannie, what's changed in the last 12 months that's compelled you to seek this appointment as opposed to following and running for candidacy on your own?
We're empty nesters. So I've considered running in the past. We have 2 children. Garrett's 22. He graduated from Washington and Lee and is now fully off the payroll and has moved to North Carolina. It would be nice to have jobs for him to come back to, but not live in my house, but come back closer. And then Abby is now a sophomore at Haverford. And when they were still home, it just wasn't, and with Glenn's work responsibilities, running wasn't an option.
Sure.
I think your answer about education is probably the only solution to the other problem, but having said that, in a couple months, we're gonna be facing the same budget issues we had a year ago. There's a good probability that the body's gonna be faced with either a choice of raising the tax rate or potentially laying off employees. Are either one of those an area that you would say I would never go to, or both of them? What are your feelings on that?
I mean, I think it's unrealistic for any official to eliminate an option before they're actually having the discussion. I think from a practical standpoint, you know, I watch you guys a fair amount live. I think it's going to end up being a combination of the two. Given the budget issues facing the city, I don't know how you're going to get around that.
So a year ago, we were running, you know, all of us running for office, and we were asked through various forums and formats our responses on what I would consider our specific hot button items. And so I wanted to go down sort of a list of some of those items from that time, as well as some that have arisen since, and possibly get your position on a number of them. And the first is, are you aware of the urban improvement project, and if so, do you support the city's role in it?
I'm very aware of the urban improvement project. I think it's a great opportunity for the community, and I was happy to see the city and the other partners come to the table for it.
Okay. Are you a member of a union? Are you familiar with union negotiations?
I am not a member of the union. I'm familiar with negotiations.
Are you aware of the various stadium plan iterations? And if so, do you support a stadium, and do you support a stadium downtown?
I do support a stadium. I would like to see downtown be considered. I have to admit that I was a little hesitant about that at first, but I actually have a brother who works in minor league baseball, and they built a new stadium downtown, and it was amazing to me when I went to visit and to attend a game how much foot traffic was generated. You know, we went during the week, how much foot traffic there was between close of business and the game starting at 7 o'clock. But, you know, I'm also in favor of soccer fields too.
He's gonna get there, don't worry.
Okay,
So-
just checking.
One of the ideas that I've put forth is if the stadium, or the stadium and/or the Suns were to move, repurposing the current stadium property, which is owned by the city, into an indoor turf complex. Is that an idea that you're familiar with, and if so, do you support it?
I'm familiar with it. I would like to see more turf than indoor. I think sports tourism is an area that the city and the county could both benefit more from. You know, Chris is probably more aware of this than the others of you, but we're a soccer family. You know, part of the reason why I couldn't run before the kids were out of the house is we were on the road every weekend to soccer tournaments. And I have seen the dollars that those types of events pump into communities. I was formerly a coach at the Hagerstown Soccer Club. The Mason-Dixon tournament isn't as successful as it used to be, and part of that is because all the fields in the county are grass, and we had I think we had 3 out of 5 years that we had to cancel because of rain. You know, you start to lose clubs and participations and dollars in that case.
Be familiar with the issues that arise associated with code enforcement. One, are you aware of those issues, and more pointedly, are you aware of rental registration, and do you support it?
I had to pull all the trees out along Park because of code enforcement. So yeah, I'm familiar. I mean, I like the rental registration. I think it might be one of the things that I think a lot of business people struggle with in town is how do we make those buildings work economically? You know, and I spent half my professional life in Frederick. We have an office in Frederick. And I can tell you it's a lot easier to buy a building in Frederick and rehab it and turn it into a viable economic position because they're a fraction of the size. You know, I mean, there's part of our problem is that we were so successful in the 20s, so all the buildings we have downtown are just humongous. You know, when we moved our office, we wanted to stay downtown. One of the buildings that we looked at was, could have been an office downstairs and then residential upstairs. When we had contractors go through, we were looking at $800,000 just to get a UNO permit, not even to paint or to put carpet or anything in like that. So while I'm in favor of the rent registration and kind of the code enforcement and keeping on top of landlords, I also think we need to find ways to make rehabbing those buildings and getting people and businesses into those buildings more economically feasible.
Are you a member of the Property and Landlord Association?
I am not.
And obviously, you probably read the article recently about the tiered tax idea. Are you aware of that recent proposal? And if so, do you have a position one way or the other?
I'm aware of it. I don't know that I have quite enough facts to have a fully formed position on it. I think it's an idea worth considering, particularly as part of a strategic plan to make some of those buildings downtown more economically viable. My concern is if you don't do it as part of a strategic plan, particularly if it's a revenue-driven decision, that it could do more damage to the revenue stream in the long term than where you're currently at, because you drive some owners out of town. If we have a flood of properties on the market, it's going to drive down values, tax base goes down, you know. So while I think it's an alternative to keep in mind, I'd want to do it very carefully.
Are you familiar with the Urban Partners Plan, the 8 Catalyst projects, and if so, are there any items within that list of 8 that you have, great support for or clear opposition?
I don't think I have any clear opposition to any of them. I think there's some of them that I like more than others. I have to admit that I was a little skeptical about the walkway, but we've done the walkway a couple times, and I think that it's been a nice addition downtown. I think there could still be a couple of improvements to it. It was nice to see the statewide recognition of it last week or the week before. But I think, the city needs to continue to have those types of long-range plans with different pieces into it that attract different individuals, satisfy other individuals, I guess.
That's all I have.
Emily?
Over our first year as a body, what do you think that we've either failed at or missed the mark on, we need to do more of, and how can you help us with that?
I don't know that I would say that you've done either. I think the first year, particularly with some new individuals, it takes a little bit of time to get your feet under you. But I think Hagerstown is on the cusp. I think the next 10 years for Hagerstown are critical as to where we end up. Right now with the rental versus home ownership within city limits, right now with the number of households receiving a check at least once a month from DSS, we need to do things sooner rather than later to turn that tide, or I think it might be too late for Hagerstown to come back from. I loved your column in the paper a couple of weeks ago. I think there are lots of positive things about Hagerstown, but we need to make sure that those are the things that survive as we go forward, and that we don't get lost in the detractors and that kind of downward economic spiral.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Jeannie.
Right?
Thanks, Jim.
See y'all.
You thought we were going to be behind schedule tonight, didn't you?
I keep us on schedule all the time, Kristen. You
You
know that.
thought I was going to put us behind.
Why would you think that?
I don't know.
Well, the only time we run late is when Kristen has the floor about something. Oh,
I don't exercise all that.
Smith?
Face time.
You want Chad?
That's
How you
okay,
doing,
that
sir?
should be short, I guarantee you. All right, Chad, just give us a little bit about yourself. Start off.
A bit about myself. Well, Chad Smith, 43 years old, longtime Hagerstown native, born and raised here. Most of my family was also. Owner of Fitness Revolution here in Hagerstown, Maryland. That's father, husband, we'll let you know.
Business owner?
That's basically me, that's basically me.
Okay. Emily,
All right.
take it off.
So what do you think are the two major issues facing the city, and how do you plan to address them?
Two major issues are revenue development, how to, either create more revenue for the city, or how to reduce spending to create more revenue. And also crime, either the perception of crime or actual amount of crime in the city needs to be addressed as well. I know with people that I talk to across the city, that's a huge issue on their minds, is drugs and crime in our community. And that would be one thing that I would like to get actively involved in, is to assist and see what best that I can do along with the rest of the council and help to reduce the crime in the city and also improve the perception of the city when it comes to drugs and crime.
Paul?
Chad, I guess my question is, what's changed in the last 12 months that has compelled you to seek this appointment as opposed to filing and for candidacy yourself and running, last year?
Last year, I think the biggest difference is that more encouragement is from the community, more encouragement. It's not a week goes by that I don't get an email or a message or some sort of communication that says that they think that I would be a benefit to the council on some level. So that's the biggest thing. So when the council seat of the Honorable Mr. Munson opened up, I was really encouraged by a number of people that I should pursue the seat.
Okay, thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though, but you had, last election cycle, you had actually began the process to
Right.
file, but ran out of time.
I was too late. I ran out of time. I was at the last minute, couldn't do it. Well, because I never really had political aspirations, so it took a lot of talking to from a number of friends to say, just go do it, right? So I said I got the courage at the last minute, but it was too late. So I've had a whole year now to think about it and to make the process a little more clear.
Cool.
Right time.
So John, our experience leads at least one of us to believe that when we talk about the budget this year, we may be faced with the choice of either employee layoffs, furloughs, or tax rate increases. Do you have an opinion on any of those things and whether any of them are absolutely verboten or what your feelings are?
I think all options have to be on the table and thoroughly discussed. Of course, me not having the detailed information at hand, it would be tough for me to make a commitment either way on any of those options. Right, but I definitely feel like all options ought to be on the table, thoroughly discussed, and then figure out what's best, not only for the city, but also what's best for the people in the city. Should be our main priority, is thinking about what's best for the people of the city, and then balance it out with what the needs and the abilities are of the city to accommodate that.
So during the campaign process, each of us as candidates were sort of asked our positions on a number of community hot-button items, and there have been some of those items that have arisen since we've taken office. I'm just going to run through sort of a list of some of those issues, possibly to get your position on any one of them. And so the first is, are you familiar with the Urban Improvement Project? And if so, do you support the city's role in it?
I'm not deeply aware of the urban, I haven't heard that name. Maybe you could just give me a brief overview.
The project with the expansion of the School for the Arts, the
USMH.
university,
Okay.
and the theater.
I'm definitely in favor of that. I feel like anything that gets more feet on the street downtown is going to be beneficial. That's one of the most important things if we're talking about urban redevelopment, is getting more people to participate in the area. So I feel like if you add more employees, if you add more opportunities for people to come downtown, I feel like that's definitely going to be, that's a great thing. I'm definitely in favor of anything that does that.
All right. Are you a member of a union, or are you familiar with union negotiations?
I'm not a member of any unions. but I am familiar with the way they work.
And you're aware of previous iterations of a stadium project, and do you support a stadium, or do you support a stadium downtown?
When the project was first explored years ago, I was very in favor of it. Of course, it's been a long time now, and I'm sure there have been conditions that have changed. And I'm definitely open to hearing new information or reviewing the info that we already have before I would make a decision whether I would support it or not support it based on new information.
You familiar with the concerns that get raised on code enforcement? And then more specifically, are you familiar with the rental registration program, and if so, do you support it or oppose it?
I'm not familiar with that.
Where the landlords of properties within the city are required to register their rentals with the city each year.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure what the, is there a drawback to that?
Not that I've seen.
Okay. Sounds reasonable to
Don't
me.
worry, you'll hear about them.
No doubt.
All right. Are you a member of the Property Owners and Landlords Association?
I am not.
And are you aware of our recent discussions about the tier tax idea?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any position on that?
I think if we're talking about moving Hagerstown forward, I think one of the most important things that's going to be key to that future is it's going to be our developers, people who own property, people who want to own property. I've heard both sides. I've heard some of Mr. Quarterman's arguments, and I've heard some of your arguments on it also. And I've also spoken to several of my clients who are developers and property owners here in the city. And I feel like, just from the info that I have, it sounds, I can understand both sides. But I think the main thing to consider is that any increase that we have will be passed along to renters. And that's the bottom line. I don't think we're going to have any landlords that are going to absorb any of these costs. And I think if you have people who have that fine line of what they can afford for rent, if we increase that by 10, 15, 20%, I think we're going to put an undue strain on a large percentage of our area's renters. That's being based on the information that I have right now. So on first opinion, I would say that it may not be the best way to go, but I can certainly understand the logic behind it.
Are you familiar with the Urban Partners Plan and the 8 Catalyst projects for downtown? And if so, do you have an opinion on any of those in particular?
Yes, do all of them. Do them as we can and as quickly as we can. I was not a fan of the Culture and Arts Trail when I first heard about it. But when I actually decided to go check it out myself, and when, to be honest, I was depressed walking down the street because I just saw garbage on the street. I saw just people who were homeless. But then I went down to this beautiful piece of construction, and when I realized what their purpose was not to make this a revenue-generating project, but it's a piece of the future, and it's something that we can rally behind, something that we can look at and be proud of, and say what's next. So I'm a fan of every single item on that list, and I feel like we should do them as we can.
Last question, do you own or rent?
I rent.
Emily, you're up.
Right, so over our first year as a body, where do you think that we have failed or not done the best job, and how can you help us over the next 3 years with that?
Well, personally, I would say before you came on board, I would say that I don't feel like the administration, and not just this administration, but I feel like just for the past number of years, there hasn't been a strong connection with the community. I don't feel like the city in general has a full buy-in on what the vision for the city is. I don't feel like there's really been let's sell this, let's help us, let's, partner with us, let's do this thing together. I feel like, not on purpose, but there's been kind of like an us and them on both sides, kind of like a mentality. And I feel like because of that, the negativity has been allowed to fester and it's been allowed to grow. And I feel like that's the norm in a lot of people's minds. I feel like that's been a failure, not for lack of trying, but maybe just different methods need to apply. But complimenting you, you're very visible. I watch all your lives, and I'm very happy that you were able to kind of be the first part in what I feel is a good turnaround for the administration. But the things that have done well, I love how active Mayor Brucci is on social media. I love how, even though we spar a little bit, I feel, I think that's the key, is just talking to people. It's just talk to people, be available when they need you to be available, and sell the vision, and just make people believe in something so that it can drown out the negative noise.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you, Chad.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
City
Chad.
Administrator comments.
Nothing additional, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Lou?
I'm just thoroughly impressed with everybody we've seen tonight, and I thank everybody for being here.
Paul?
I'd echo some of the same sentiments. I think it's incredibly encouraging to see the talent of the applicants and the desire and the commitment that I think we all share, not only them here this evening, but everyone here already, of the commitment we all want to have what's best for Hagerstown. And I appreciate all the applicants coming out this evening and putting themselves out there, because that's, as we all know, it's not an easy thing to do. So thank you.
Kristen?
I would also like to thank everybody for coming this evening, for certainly submitting your names, and for consideration. As I said in our closed session, when I looked at the 22 applicants, there were two things for me that were important in that deliberation. And for me, those two things were selecting candidates, beyond their professional background, that don't have sort of that axe to grind with any specific operation that the city or this body, or however you want to define it, is doing or not doing. And that was important to me in that review process. And the second issue was identifying folks that don't see this as a political position, because, as I said in our the meeting with the body, at least in my opinion, this isn't a position of politics. It is sincerely a position of public service. We don't delve into the politics of party affiliation and those types of things hardly ever. And really, if you do have nothing better to do than watch some of these meetings, some of the stuff we do, and a good bit of stuff we do is
Mundane was the word you were looking for, yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's the word I used, minutia and mundane. I mean, it just happens, and it's a large part of that life, but every bit of that is sort of a small piece of that ball that we continue to push up that hill to make the city better. And so I'm happy to, after the interviews tonight, feeling confident that the 8 folks we chose, for me at least, met both of those metrics. So thank you.
Emily? I'm going to close out by saying I appreciate everyone who came in and gave it the time, and I most definitely appreciate the fact that although you weren't in a position a year and a half ago or whatever, that you are in a position now that you want to give of yourself to our community, because that's basically what you're doing. I mean, it's not like it's for the pay. So thank you very much. Great. I think we have a tough choice to try to pick one out of 8. So Thank you very much for your time and for giving it to us. Thank you. With that, I need to get a motion to go into executive session do I really have to read it? To discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, and all those other things.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. We're in executive session. We're gonna take a 5-minute break at least.
I agree. Thank you.
Do you want to go upstairs?